Howdy, Ausgrave royalty here. We are continuing our series on Morin Gillette's King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. We've gone through a lot, so glad you're sticking with me. We started out this series by going over why Morin Gillette are writing about this, why it's significant to them, and why they feel it's significant to the world to share this knowledge. And then we went through some of the immature, not in a bad way, but just in an underdeveloped way, the immature masculine archetypes and their shadow inflations. Then we talked about the mature masculine archetypes, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And we, in the last episode, talked about some of the psychological dynamics that are at play and things to keep in mind when we're talking about archetypes and the ego and how they interact and individuation and all that, how they're tied to survival and that women can access the masculine archetypes through the animus and all that stuff. So that was the last episode. So, good news and bad news, and it's the same piece of news. This is going to be the most quote-heavy portion by far, archetypes in the body. So, we're returning to this subject, and I say return because in the last season when we talked about the book Archetypes by Dr. Anthony Stevens, highly encourage y'all to check that out, by the way. In that last season, we talked a lot about archetypes and the body and their biological roots. That was actually one of the, if not the main mission of Dr. Anthony Stevens writing the book in the first place. He noticed that there was some sort of fetishistic aversion to, in his day in the 60s, to rooting psychology in the hard sciences, and he wanted to make the case that there are biological roots for psychology, and especially in association with Carl Jung, because Jung is even seen in psychological circles as kind of a crackpot. Even today, he's just new agey, blah blah blah, archetypes, yeah, whatever. Just clock in and do the job. I don't care about archetypes, like this is the society we live in. And I'm sympathetic to it. I just want to do my part to send up a flare on a potential alternative way of self-examination. So, that was a hell of an introduction, Justin. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go through some introductory remarks, and then I have a very lengthy section. And for those of you who have been watching the channel, archetypes in the body and the biological roots, I think it's all fascinating and all that. However, within the category of archetypal psychology, when you take into consideration how it can help people psychologically, what characteristics in yourself to recognize as potentially unprocessed, how they can how individuating yourself trickles out into ethics in the wider society. All things considered, archetypes and the biological roots and all that, it's my least favorite aspect of the subject. And I don't hide it. I'm not hiding it. Others have done a much better job than me, of course. I'm just an enthusiastic fan. I'm in no way an authority on these matters. Please go do your own research and don't take my word for anything. But in that spirit, I'm sort of cheating in a way and yet honoring my viewers best I can, in the sense that I'm just doing a bunch of reading in this episode. A, because I'm not enthusiastic about this particular piece of the subject matter, and y'all know it. And B, because it's articulated way better than I could formulate by the authors themselves. Now, that typically goes with everything in this subject matter, and I agree with that. But I don't feel as strongly to share my own spin on things when it comes to this archetypes in the body. And that's the reason it's going to be, I'm leaning on the authors more than usual. Instead of 99%, it's 99.9%, basically. So with that in mind, I guess we can get started. In case, for some reason, y'all haven't listened to any other episode, archetypes are basically psychological structures that are biological in nature in terms of how the hemispheres in the brain interpret reality and how they communicate with one another. Archetypes are biological structures that have also evolved along with us in the process of natural selection. So as human experiences became more specialized and more distinct, psychobiologically, through the evolutionary process, that was recognized, and we're now prepared at birth to receive certain characteristic human experiences, such as being cared for by a mother, a family structure, becoming attached to things, attachment, and John Bowlby and attachment theory we talked about last season, and Dr. Anthony Stevens' time at the Matera Baby Center and how infants were cared for and how behaviorism was the dominant theory at the time. In many ways, it still is today. So go check those videos out. I'm just quickly recapping all of what we've already talked about. Basically, Jung said that individuation, that is becoming an psychologically integrated individual, and aiming towards wholeness, yin and yang, anima, animus, making the unconscious conscious, all that stuff. All that process at the biological level is integrating and perfecting a clear communicative path between the hemispheres of the brain. So the left brain is like logic, language. Does this make sense? Like sense experience. And then the right brain is like interpretation, intuitive, dreams, symbols, all that stuff. And they're both operating all the time. Now, whether they're communicating effectively to bring in an accurate interpretation of reality to the receiver, varies from person to person. And so the better they communicate, and this can be done through shadow work and reframing, and we've talked about all this. Long story, but that's kind of those are the highlights. That's the highlight reel. So, Moore and Gillette actually call out Dr. Anthony Stevens in a good way. They say Stevens proposes that while the ego may function most of the time in the left brain, it also draws on the right brain. Consciousness, he says, is a pervasive function of the whole brain, though right and left modes of consciousness are quite distinct. The personal unconscious and its various complexes seem to manifest in the right brain. By dreaming, the right brain communicates with the still primarily left brain identified ego. So this is a succinct summary of what we covered last season. Looking at my notes, can't possibly cover all the details in this video. Obviously, go check out the books, Archetypes by Dr. Anthony Stevens, and the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover books by Moore and Gillette. I'm going to read from the paper book a whole appendix. Yeah, I say whole appendix, but it's only a few pages. But as I looked through it, it was so well articulated, I couldn't really think of anything to pull out and summarize. It was just pretty succinct on its own. So I'm just going to read straight from it. Get comfortable. All right. Appendix B, Archetypes and the Limbic System. According to a number of brain researchers, most notably Paul MacLean, the limbic system, augmenting the more basic instincts of the underlying R complex, or reptilian brain, is the seat of mammalian and species-typical instincts for all primates, including humans. Located in the paleocortical area, the limbic system consists of the fornix, hippocampus, cingulate cortex, anterior thalamic nucleus, amygdala, septum, the mammillary bodies, and associated hypothalamic areas. They're trying to throw me off, I swear. There's a reason. Yeah. Continue. Okay. The paleocortex, as the term's Greek root suggests, is the older brain, a region we share with other mammals. Ours is genetically configured, particularly like the paleocortices of other primates. So I got that. You won't fool me with cortices. Because the mechanism of evolution serves to develop newly structures gradually based upon older ones, there remain in our bodies any number of archaic structures that continue to fulfill their more primitive functions. One familiar vestigial organ, the appendix, no longer serves any apparent function. It is believed to have once aided the digestion of grasses, and because of this, it is now a frequent site of infection. The limbic system, however, continues in its inherited functions and suggestively seems to be the locus for foundational archetypal structures. Suggestively, because this would appear to link human archetypes with the instinctive patterns of other species. Paul Broca in 1878 was the first to identify a large convolution common to the brains of all mammals as the great limbic lobe. In 1937, James Perez realized that the limbic system was the seat of the experience and expression of emotion. Paul MacLean later developed the full concept of the limbic system. MacLean came to believe the system was not only the center for emotion, but also the integration center for correlating, quote, every form of internal and external perception. It has, he claims, quote, many strong connections with the hypothalamus for discharging its impression. While some researchers do not accept this notion, there appears to be no other neurological system available to play such an integrative role. Within the limbic system are three primary subsystems. 1. The affiliative attachment subsystem. 2. The autonomy aggression subsystem. 3. The integrative inhibition subsystem. The affiliation attachment subsystem, as the name implies, is almost certainly responsible for general mammalian tendencies to form social units characterized by nurturing, affection, and play. In humans and other primates, these affiliative impulses may result in such complex psychological and social phenomena such as reliance, dependence, sounds needy, and collaboration. The affiliative impulse seems to arise along with each species' particular structures of affiliation, primarily in the cingulate gyrus. MacLean has proposed that the concept of, quote, family, for example, may be structured into the limbic system. Interesting. Exploration, fear, defensive strategies, fighting, the acquisition of territory, the need for control over the inner and outer worlds, and other self-preservative behaviors are a result of the autonomy aggression instinct. This impulse enables humans, some of you know where this is going, This impulse enables humans to form cohesive selves through adversity. It may also give rise to the instinct to order society hierarchically. I wonder what that sounds like. The autonomy aggression subsystem appears to be located in the amygdaloid complex. There is evidence that in primates, the amygdala plays a hierarchically ordering role for our societies. The third major limbic subsystem mediates the integration/inhibition instinct and is apparently located in the hippocampus and the septum. McLean believes, I keep thinking of Die Hard, believes this subsystem is the integrative center for the entire nervous system. The hippocampus can be thought of as the gatekeeper of the limbic system, which system is the capital of the nervous system as a whole. Teamed with the neocortex, which brings cognitive functions into play, the hippocampus's gate mechanism seems to be responsible for regulating, arranging, prioritizing, and modulating data from nearly every aspect of the nervous system. The hippocampus regulates alternating affiliative attachment and autonomous/aggressive behaviors. When properly operating, this system regulates these competing drives to appropriately interact with any set of environmental stimuli, both inner and outer. We believe, Moore and Gillette believe, that the 4 foundational archetypes we present in this series, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, arise in the limbic system and are then elaborated and refined as they pass upward through the neocortex. This elaboration may be primarily achieved either by the left brain's rational, logical functions or by the right brain's intuitive, holistic mode. I want to repeat that again. We believe that the 4 foundational archetypes we present in this series arise in the limbic system and are then elaborated and refined as they pass upward through the neocortex. This elaboration may be primarily achieved either, so there's multiple ways, multiple channels, either by the left brain's rational, logical functions or by the right brain's intuitive, holistic modes. It's more than one path up the mountain. They may be given humane form, humane in quotes, especially in the frontal lobes, which seem to be responsible for empathetic and altruistic emotions, as well as for refined cognitive processes. In order for the ego to know and access any of the 4 major archetypes, it must experience a particular archetype as an asymmetrical composite of each of the others. In light of the brain research we've cited, a provocative correspondence suggests itself between the archetypal and the limbic systems. It seems clear that what we call the lover arises originally in the affiliative attachment subsystem, and our warrior arises in the autonomy aggression subsystem. The magician, which some other psychologies mistake as the ego, arises in the integration/inhibition subsystem as its interface with the neocortical structures. We'd locate the ego within the neocortex proper. This maintains the ego's status as the apparent center of waking consciousness. Here it is separate from the magician, but initially at least more closely related to this archetype than it is to the lover or the warrior. The king manifests as the integrated, mature functioning of all the neocortical and limbic subsystems. Sorry, I lost my thought. Okay. Though it seems to arise in the septal hippocampal subsystem, It transcends this system's gatekeeping functions. More than a regulator, the king embraces the warrior, magician, and lover in an integrated, constitutive manner. There's some other notes here that won't be relevant for audio or right now, so I'll leave it there. There's a bit more, if you'll hang with me. Still from Moore and Gillette, quote, "If archetypes arise, as Jung believed, at a fundamentally instinctual level, then it could be that they originate in our most primitive region, the reptilian brain, elaborated as they pass upward through the paleo-mammalian and neo-mammalian brains. The imagistic, intuitive structures of the archetypes would rise primarily into our right brains. But since our ego's experience of the archetypes will also be mediated by the left brain, they will also be influenced by the linguistic and logical modes of thinking centered there. Archetypes hold a sense of otherness, perhaps because they originate in levels of the brain so much deeper than the source of ego consciousness, and then must be translated into terms that make sense to the left brain. Archetypes in their fullness involve both the left and the right brain functions. This is clearly the case with the four foundational archetypes of the mature masculine. Certainly, the rational, strategic, and emotionally detached modes of the magician and the warrior are characteristic of the left brain processes. Although they seem to draw secondarily on right brain functions and the visually oriented, aesthetic, intuitive modes of the lover are characteristic of right brain functions, although the lover seems to draw on left brain processes. This field of inquiry is wide open to existing future research." All right. I give my reading a B-. They threw a lot at me, but I think I did better than not. Thanks for sticking with me through that. I'd encourage, of course, read the books and, do further research. Again, I'm just a fan of this. I think I at least have the intelligence to know where the effective passages are for my viewers, and yet simultaneously the humbleness to let people who have done the articulating on this complex matter do the articulating. So I wanted to do this because even though it's not like, again, this particular nuance of the subject is not like my favorite, right? But I have so much respect for the efforts of Dr. Anthony Stevens and others to root archetypes in our biology. We got to throw the materialists a bone, right? It's just good marketing. So if we can tie self-improvement to biology, gives it more credibility, right? But that's a cynical perspective. Ultimately, it's just the truth, right? What we're after is the truth. And yeah, this is still an ongoing new frontier, this kind of archetypal psychology and its link with biology. But I think it's pretty compelling myself. I was just thinking to myself, like, I wonder what, like Occam's razor style, if there's a simpler explanation for why we come up with, like, all human societies have some sort of myth and come up with some sort of tradition and some sort of culture and all that. You'd think we just want to, like, as long as we have water and food, why would we do anything else? That's what survival is. Mm-hmm. Why the dominance? Why do we create hierarchies? Like, nature abhors a vacuum. So what other what other kinds of principles would align and explain every single human piece of existence, both genetically and behaviorally, all into one theory, more elegantly than this? Let me know. I've looked over a lot of stuff, and maybe I've overlooked things because of my biases as I've encountered material, but this is a pretty elegant theory, in my opinion. I'm just reading my notes here. Let's see. I said, but my reason for doing this is to add the necessary biological weight to the theory of archetypes, that accessing the archetypes and increasing one's awareness towards a goal of individuation is also a biological effort. It may be too bold to conclude, but this method of accessing the archetypes we've covered in this series could amount to altering one's physiology. Okay. Very interesting, Justin. I seem to have forgotten my own notes here. What a great insight, Justin. Basically, what I'm saying there is as you become more individuated and do your shadow work and all that, there may be changes occurring at the biological level. Isn't that crazy? So there's a relatively new age idea, which I don't know the details of, by the way, that, sorry. I wanted to talk about this. That's why I took the note. There's a relatively new age idea, and I'm new to it, new to the new age idea, that stress is the source of physical ailments in the body. Again, I've called out True Detective Season 1 as being like the best season in television history that I've ever seen. But what did he say? Woody Harrelson, he was like, I don't hold grudges. That's the kind of shit that gives you cancer, or something like that. And his character is very like pragmatic. Rustin, Matthew McConaughey's character, is the more abstract, like head in the clouds, maybe like right brain kind of character. Harrelson is more left brain, like pragmatic. Can we follow the evidence? Blah blah blah. So him saying that, coming from him, a new age idea coming from him is interesting. That it's featured in mainstream culture, as in being in True Detective. That I'm just glad that idea has emerged, is what I'm saying. But I've heard there's actually real science behind this. Like the point is that there are stakes that improving one's mental situation by becoming aware of where archetypal possession is occurring in one's life could actually cure or prevent potential serious physical stress manifested ailments. In other words, putting the health in mental health. There are two books. One is called The Stress of Life, I think it's called. I don't know if that's exactly it. I'll try and find it. I'll link it below. But there's also the book, The Body Keeps the Score. That one got really popular about 6 years ago-ish. I was actually in a master's program for becoming a counselor, which I may go back to one day. I just couldn't stomach even more student loans and even more delays to getting a real paycheck, so I went into tech instead. But I still have my credits. I may go back one day because I like helping people. Please comment down below what you think about all this. Hope you got something out of the emphasis on the biological side. Maybe some of you can carry the torch for me and start a channel on that niche on its own. I just wanted to send up the flare, point you to where the ideas are, and y'all do the further reading. I'm learning all this with y'all. I am no authority. As I always say, I'm just an enthusiastic fan, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, take care. Bye-bye.